Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sharing Hope Community Conversations. I'm your moderator, Nimade, and this is our monthly community conversations that we have focusing on the BIPOC community, and we focus on different topics each month just to give us a safe place to come together and talk with people who have a shared background, shared interest about a wide variety of topics. I am not a medical professional or a mental health professional. I'm just someone with a lived experience who enjoys bringing people together to talk about different things. Now, this is through NAMI, and they do have various resources available. So if you find anything particularly triggering that we talk about, or if you just need to know how to reach out or even just get involved with NAMI, you can reach out to them. As I mentioned, so today we have two great guests joining us. We have George Corbin, who is the founder of Humble But Hungry. He's Silver with us. So I'm going to let both of the gentlemen introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Dr. Silver, if you just want to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you.
Okay. Greetings to everybody. Dr. J. Silver, Doctor of Psychology. In my background, twofold. On the clinical side, traumatic brain injuries, normally referred to as TBIs, PTSD, cognitive abnormalities, a complete forecast of what we call the gray matter and what affects that, primarily with a concentration on veterans coming back from New Dawn, Iraqi freedom, Afghanistan, that whole gambit. On the research side, with respect to psychology, I have a concentration on stealth, subliminal messaging, and deception is what I focus on with respect to that. I'm currently with New Jersey Hospital Association, where myself, Dr. Hall, Dr. Mims, we are a trio. We have a concentration as far as healthcare is concerned. We work with veterans that fall into that same plateau that need help. And this is an ideal topic with respect to supporting men's health, how they come along, and in the broader sense, the community at large, especially of brown and Black folks that really need healthcare coverage, maybe need somebody to talk to, and for a variety of stigmas and how men are raised in general, they don't necessarily get that. So that's a little bit about me and our concentration.
Awesome, thank you. And we're so glad to have you join us this evening and share a little bit of your knowledge with us. And then George, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Greetings, everyone. George Corbin, born and raised Wilmington, Delaware, over 12 years in education, teaching in different capacities outside the classroom, which led me to start a nonprofit called Humble But Hungry to be able to fill in some of those gaps that Doc just mentioned. It's a pleasure to be here. Look forward to the conversation, look forward to the questions. Glad to team up with Every Man Counts on another platform. And during the day, I work in agriculture as a biologist. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. And yes, as George mentioned, he teams up with Every Man Counts. The executive director, and my sister, the founder of it, is on with us tonight as well, Aja. And it's a nonprofit here in Wilmington that works with men and families in the area. So was glad to have someone here to represent us in that avenue as well. So our topic tonight is men's mental health. You know, we talk about mental health all the time, but sometimes it seems like men just sort of get, you know, pushed away on that discussion, or not really as in depth into it as they should be, especially given that they are affected by it. I have some stats. So 6 million men are affected by depression each year. The 5 major mental health conditions affecting men are depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, psychosis or schizophrenia, and eating disorder, which I think would be surprising to many people. I don't think people think of men and eating disorders, but it's definitely something that does impact them. Dr. Silva, when you are dealing with your patients and clients, what do you find to be one of the largest reasons why people aren't coming to seek, men aren't coming to seek treatment?
And you'll find that most men will confirm this. It's part of the upbringing. If you go all the way back to when men are boys, young men, boys, they don't cry. They don't tell because it's classified and viewed as being soft. And that's kind of as young men grow from little boys to young men, adolescents to men, to cry or to seek help for anxiety or depression or suicide is considered soft. Men are viewed as warriors, and men themselves view themselves as warriors. So their objective is to conquer. Their objective is to be strong. Their objective is to have a coat of armor where nothing bothers them. They go out, they seek, they conquer, they win. And that's part of the structure. So that being said, within those confounds, men don't reach out and seek help. Now you'll find that certain professions, depending on what you do, by policy, sometimes by law, you have to seek out individuals like myself, Dr. Hall, Dr. Mims. We're all veterans. We're all military. I'm a combat veteran. So I was on the job, 85th, 87 Recon Extraction, Air Assault. So just based by the very nature, after an assignment, I have to go in and talk to somebody and sit down, and it's good, depending on where you fall into that tagline, to kind of get that off your chest. If not, you explode. And we see that in society. Like you run down some stats, you find out that with suicide, very high among men as opposed to women, and the effective rate of executing suicide, men over women, is 100%. Men, by very nature, are going to get the job done, and for a variety of reasons. So let me stop there, because I know you have some more juice on the table you want to throw out here. So go ahead and start.
No, that was great. And yes, you're right. They do. They have higher suicide rates, which I think are sometimes surprising for people to know. Then also, I mean, not that you want to say successful, but they have a higher rate of it going through, largely due in fact to the fact that they use firearms. So that's a whole nother conversation, but it's largely due to that. And you mentioned, it starts when they're young and how they're not able to be vulnerable or, have those feelings out. George, you have a history of dealing with the youth as a teacher and with what you do in your work now with your organization. How do you help to foster that in boys, to let them know that it is okay to talk about those feelings and be vulnerable and put that side of them out there that will hopefully later allow them to seek help later if they need it?
I think the most important thing that we always stress to individuals is to try to get them to understand what depression looks like. I think oftentimes, because of, like Doc has said, we're trained and taught as men that this is the norm, and we're just grinders, and we got to get it done, and we got to provide. We go out, we get our food, and we don't realize, and I'm a living witness, that you don't realize that you're in depression. You don't realize that you're suffering because you keep saying to yourself, well, you're going to get past it, or it's going to be a better day. And you just, before you know it, you're slowly getting deeper and deeper into the quicksand, and you keep saying, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out, because you don't know what it looks like. So for us, the first thing that we always do, especially with our young people, and of all ages, but of course the young ones, we try to catch them early and really share with them to understand that what it looks like. These are signs that, and you're trained as a teacher to kind of pay attention to those. Like, if a kid sits in the front of the classroom and they're excited about class for the first 3 months, and now they're coming late and they're in the back of the classroom and their clothes look a certain way, like those are signs now that something is going on. So I think that so many times that we got to first and foremost have those conversations to get people to understand what it looks like, because the way most of us are raised, the word depression isn't coming up in the house. Like, you don't hear depression. I didn't hear about mental illness until I got to undergrad. Like, you didn't hear about it too much. Maybe it popped up in a book in high school, but it was just something that you skimmed over on a chapter, like, oh, mental health. Yeah, that's not me. That's them other people. And you keep flipping the page and you don't pay attention to that. So you don't even realize that you are possibly suffering because you don't even know what suffering looks like. So our first goal is to peel back some layers to learn the individual and then get them to see, okay, well, if you were acting like this for the first quarter of the year and now you've changed, what changed? Because now we got to let them know that, okay, you are beginning to touch on those areas and it's okay because we have. And now that's when people need to go to that next step to get help.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Just being able to recognize it, because so many areas in families, you don't really talk about it. I think that we're lucky now that it's being talked about more and more people are like being aware of it. But still, for the longest time, it wasn't something that was talked about. And then, especially in the Black community, it was like, get over it. You're tough. You're strong. Like, you don't know what problems are. Like, you feel sad, get up and go to work. It's not a luxury that we were, especially our culture, that we're afforded. Dr. Silver, Corbin mentioned trying to explain to the boys and men what depression looks like. Can you give us some examples of things for people to look out for, men especially, that could make them say, hey, this isn't just, oh, I'm kind of down, but maybe I should get some help?
Absolutely. He touched on two good points. And I'm quite sure he has heard it in his forum. I hear it among teachers where they tell young boys, you got to man up. And that's the first sign of that stigma that boys don't cry. If you're feeling soft, or if you're feeling you have been outed, so to speak, you have to man up. You have to take it on the chin and keep moving. But his second point that he mentioned was a change in behavior. That is a very strong sign that something in the household is going sideways, because you can't hide behavior. Behavior is going to manifest in your actions. So he said that going to the back of the class, a change in clothing, a change in grooming, a change in attitude, maybe a mild individual now all of a sudden it has become a bully. And he's taken out acts of aggression toward individuals. So that's a huge sign. What helps with those areas is that you get young men involved in sports, because sports is a great outlet. And you find that a lot of times with the contact sports, but even that has to be monitored too, because of some elements naturally with the football and some of the other sports. TBIs are huge with respect to that, just because of the nature of the sport you're hitting, and you're hitting hard. But sports is a great outlet to get some of that aggression out. You got to relieve that tension, because when it becomes bottled up, everybody has a different trigger, and everybody has a different set point on when they begin to explode. And what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to minimize that before it happens, get a person to a point where they can talk and they can express it. For example, most of us had to go through suicide training. For me, I went through it with DOD. So we had a mix of individuals, and actually had some civilians down there. And you got to run through drills that are true to life. So for me, I had a partner who was military, and he was contemplating suicide. And the folks that weren't military said, man, that Jay, well, his ass cheated. That boy, he took a shortcut, and the shortcut happened to deal with a Dear John letter. So this is something that military brats understand. And the Dear John letter is a military vet who may go overseas, and he may marry one of the nationals from where he's stationed. He marries that person, bring them back to the States, get them set up. They start bringing over their family. So while he's on what we call a TDY, or when I was in what we call a long tour, which is 18 months or longer, you may be at a remote site. He's paying the mortgage. He's taking care of all the finance. He's setting up the household. And right before his tour ends, he gets that Dear John letter from his spouse saying, listen, I don't love you, don't want you anymore. The spouse then brought over the real spouse, and brought over their mother and father, and brought over the children, and then kicked him to the curb. So one of two things happens. that vet eats his gun, or that vet takes an assignment, he goes on a mission, and that whole family disappears. So my outreach to that vet was saying, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go in, we're going to see the commander. We're going to sit down. We're going to get you some assistance off the job where you can put some extra money in your pocket. We're going to get you to rebuild your finances, get you back to where you were when you start on this journey, feel good. And then what you do is you kind of hip up with the person. So the person can mirror you, you can mirror them. But the objective behind this, like what Corbin says, that you want to be able to monitor the behavior, because the behavior has to be positive, but you have to share. And you have to be real. You can't sugarcoat it. And you got to say, listen, I know how you feel. I know you want to go down, get that 55-gallon drum with some whoop ass and get busy. I understand. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the higher ground. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to put in place. We're going to make the magic happen. That's what normally brings somebody out of that situation. They got to have somebody to lean on. That person got to be real, and you have to share that with them. But keep in mind, we got to retool how we think. So monitor the behavior. A prime example that I can share with everybody, we all drive. And so when somebody cuts you off, you really don't know the reason why they cut you off, but immediately you got something for that person. So it's in our natures, man, let me get my hands on that person. I got something for them. But if you can look at the situation as that, maybe they're trying to get to the hospital. Maybe they have an emergency. Maybe this is the last out for them being late to that job before they don't have any more job. So a lot of times it's a matter of us retooling our thinking, because we can control our actions. A lot of times you'll find that type of behavior does not exist when you're in a situation when you can put your hands on somebody. So if you're in the store, the whole situation is completely different because the dynamics are different. So we go through that process of watching the behavior. So we have to rechange the behavior. And a good example is look at some of the folklore or mores that we have learned. And then when you learn it the correct way, when that same situation comes to the surface, it's easy to revert back to how it was given to you originally, because now it becomes part of the DNA code. So when Corbin mentioned about the behavior, that's key. And that's at any level. When behavior changes, folks are talking, their mouth might not be moving, but it is. They're telling you what's going on, and you have to monitor that behavior, and you want to address it early because they're looking for an out. And they may be in a position where they don't have any outs. So a forum like this, we get to share. And the purpose of sharing, say, well, you know what? I never thought of it like that. Maybe I need to go back to the drawing board and rethink this, start from ground zero and rebuild.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on a lot of really, really great points. It's, I think one of the hardest things, just from obviously a woman's point of view, watching men, is that they tend to have so much, especially family men, like so much on their shoulders, right? You mentioned finances. I feel like when I read stories about things happening, that almost always seems to be like the root cause a lot of times, is something has happened in the finances and it's really gotten them down. And I know that finance is an area that you talk about frequently also, Corbin. But in regards to like men and mental health, like if you had conversations with men or boys regarding finances and when times are down and how to really just navigate through those difficult times.
Reword your question for me again one more time.
Yeah, just I feel like oftentimes when men, like when we talk about depression, or if I read things about depressions, sometimes they seem like they're frequently rooted in finances.
All right.
So, just with your conversations with men and boys, like, do you have those difficult conversations if they come to you when they're going through difficult times? Like, how do you help them navigate through that?
Well, as Doc has already kind of touched on, that joining up the hip, like, the at the end of my emails when I taught was always, people really don't care what you know until they know you care. Like that was like what I stood on, year after year, in the classroom, out the classroom. And it's evident. Like when a teacher would come down the hall to get me to have to talk to a student is because I had that relationship with him, whether we grew up in the same neighborhood or whether I look like him. It was something that made them connect. So to answer your question, you know, my goal was always to realize, like, let me see if I can get them to listen after I let them talk. So many times is that, you know, people are put in situations where they never get a chance to talk, whether they're grown men in their household and they don't get a chance to share, or whether they're young boys in the household and they don't get a chance to share. And that's one of the things I always drive home on every forum that people will listen to wives, mothers, sisters, grandmoms, is like give these young men and these grown men a chance to talk. It doesn't mean they got to fly off the handle, and it doesn't mean you're going to agree, but first and foremost, just give them a chance to talk. That in itself allows them to then get some things out. And if we can decipher through maybe some of the yelling, it might get a little testy, and we get through all the muck. Now we begin to understand, all right, you know what? He's not working 40 hours a week anymore. And he's been troubled not to share that he's working 20 hours a week, trying to figure it out because he never had a chance to talk. So my objective is always to figure out, you know, if we have a connection. And then when we begin to talk about finances, they got to be real. You know, Dr. J talked about it. Like, if they're not going to be real, then it's hard to help. And I think that in lies the trouble that we encounter a lot in talking to men and boys, is that they have a tough time being honest. And I don't think, it's probably for many different reasons, as we've already kind of spoken and talked on. But one of them is pride. You know, we are very prideful, you know, beings. But again, if you can find that one that you can kind of let them understand. And I say it all the time, I'm very transparent. I wasn't always an associate biologist. I didn't always have Humble but Hungry. Like, I grew up on 26 and Thatcher, right in the hood of Wilmington. I've seen people shot, killed, stabbed. I've seen my parents struggle. I've seen them do well. So I have a testimony, and I always used it in my classroom to say, listen, it's nothing that you're going through that I either haven't gone through or someone close to me, a brother or uncle, a parent, didn't go through. So you're not the first one. So we have some tools, whether it's me or they got to come to you or they go to Doc or they go to someone to help. There are tools in place. But, you know, our first objective is to break down the walls for them to first admit that, okay, they're struggling with finances. And most people do. Like, if we're going to be completely honest, if we got the stats on that, I mean, I know that's one of the top reasons why marriages, you know, tend to fail, is because of finances and lack of communication. So why are we to think that individuals that are outside of marriages aren't struggling with their finances? Because again, it's not being taught. It's not being taught in the classrooms. And again, that's one of the reasons why I left the school system to start my nonprofit, because they're not going to teach it. They don't want everybody to win. They don't want everybody to be in good shape. So, you know, herein lies where we kind of stand, and we get to that point. So, you know, we drive home that they matter. I don't care if they're broke, they don't have any money, they matter. And then we begin to talk about, okay, this is how we're going to turn $1 into $1.50 and $2 and so on and so forth. But people tend to want to bite off more than they can chew because of the pressures that have been put on them wherever they are. And that's at any level. Pressures are being put on folks. So, you know, I always talk to teachers, principals, whoever will listen, and say, yo, give them a chance to talk. Like, give them a chance to share what they're thinking. Because my last few years teaching, they were driving home some points that I disagreed. Like, I don't care about a kid having his shirt tucked in. Like, I don't care about a kid having his belt on if he ain't eat since 2 o'clock yesterday when he stayed after school, and he only stayed after school because he knew he would get a snack. He didn't really want to be there. But if I can sit here in this classroom and listen to whatever Miss Johnson got to say, and I know I'm gonna get another snack, then I'm gonna sit here. So it's just the agenda that, you know, is being pushed that doesn't need to be, because there's somebody higher up that doesn't come into school enough to know what's going on. But again, I just try to find them points to let them know that we care, and that you're not the first person that's went through this. You're not the first person that's had these struggles. You're not going to be considered weird or an outlier. You know, remember we did a poll and we asked men, do we think it's okay to cry? And the poll came back that most men said no, it's not okay. Like, you know what I mean? It's not okay to cry. I mean, these are regular, everyday working folks that took up that poll and said no. So if you got people that feel like it's not okay, that parents, men that say it's not okay to cry, then to Doc's point, you're going to have another generation that's teaching their boy, man up. Man, you better not cry. I better not see no tears. So then here we go. They become older and they don't want to be that vulnerable. They don't want to share it, especially with another man. Like that becomes tough. So that's why I'm so careful and appreciative of the men that I have in my life that I can be vulnerable with, that I can share, because it's few and far between, because people haven't even been raised. Like some people wouldn't even accept me to say certain things, or man, yeah, I had to ball out and have a moment. They're like, what? Corb, you? Yeah. So, you know, when folks don't know what that looks like, they even tense up as friends and as your support system. So that's key as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are all great points, and getting to that level of comfort with people is important because that's what helps you open up. I think a really great point you made was making sure that people know that they matter. I think a large part, like society as a whole, is that we all get like external validation, and people base so much of their self-worth on everyone's opinions about them or the material objects they have, instead of realizing that like they themselves just existing matters. Everything else is like icing on the cake, but like just they themselves matter, because when you feel like all of your worth is in other things, and then those other things get taken away, you feel worthless, and then you're plunging. Wesley said, according to the povertyusa.org, oops, and it went away, there is 400,000 living in poverty in Delaware from 2019. And that doesn't even take into account the pandemic. So that's definitely going to impact everybody, or impact people, their finances and their way of being. I did also want to touch on, oh, God.
No, I was going to say, and again, this is what I always would drive home to my board, is that people need to understand that a person living in poverty could be very well on this Zoom call. Like people, that's why we stopped using the word homeless and we started using the word less fortunate, because there were families of people that I know went to school, that had a degree, that were struggling. Like they fell on some hard times and no furniture in the house, but they were coming to work every day with a smile on their face, trying to put on this facade like they got it all together, until we were able to, again, break down some walls and let them know, like, wait, it's help out here. Like, you don't have to, you know, as a recently divorced woman of a particular family that I'm referring to, like, there's help out here. But people, again, as you said, people are so afraid to say help, and so afraid to say, like, oh, I went to such and such university and I have this title in the school or this title in the organization. People are going to look at me differently if I tell them I'm struggling and my car has been repoed. And that's why I get here so early in the morning, because I've been catching 2 buses. Like, you know what I mean? So people, again, that pride thing is tough. You know, people really are, you know, and social media doesn't help, but that's a whole nother conversation for another.
It's a whole nother one. But yeah, I mean, that does have a large impact. Something else I wanted to touch on, and we'll go back to depression as well later, but I wanted to talk about anxiety, because I feel like that especially is something that men don't talk about a lot, that they have anxiety or that they get panic attacks and things like that. I know Dr. Silva, you know, working with veterans, there's PTSD. And so, you know, they may be able to like touch on it a little bit more. But overall, I just feel like it's definitely something that impacts everyone, right? Like anxiety and anxiety attacks, panic attacks, it doesn't care what gender you are. But I think it's a lot harder for a man to say like, oh, I can't do this because I'm having an anxiety attack or panic attack. What are some ways for them to A, identify it, and B, work through it a little bit?
Corbin hit it exactly on the head. You got to be real with self first. There's no way of getting around the demons. For me, I'm a strong push of what we call CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where whatever's taking place, you have to learn how to coexist with it. And then Corbin also touched on another very point where you have men that are trying to rise to a certain level, to a certain occasion. Now, he mentioned wives, mothers, daughters, sisters. Believe it or not, in most aspects, Men have women on pedestals. And if women want to crush a man, all she has to do is say, listen, I thought you was rising up to the occasion, supposed to be taking care of sister. You're not cutting it. You're not even getting there. That, among anything else out there, will kill a guy faster than anything else. That is huge because the anxiety of wanting to do well and please his lady or look good for his mother or be an example to his sisters, that is huge. That is huge. So when you have that level of encouragement of rising to the occasion, you hear all of the different statements that are made behind every good man is a good woman. It's a tag team system of getting from point A to point B, recognizing your limitations, recognizing your strengths, and also recognizing your faults. So when you can recognize your faults, okay, I have some issues, and I need to deal with these issues here, but also how do I put these issues in check? So for me, being a combat veteran, education was an outlet for me because I have a nasty temper from being a combat veteran. I have no problem hurting somebody. Not to speak it, but being a combat veteran, I participated in some campaigns that are not even listed. You do some nasty business to have our freedoms and liberties, to keep that the way it is. It's nasty business. So for me, one, I recognize my shortcomings, and one is my temper. For us that served in the military, you can't come back with an excuse. An excuse is unacceptable. So that creates anxiety because now you have to perform. You have to be optimal. So knowing that, what does it take to be at that level? And when you recognize that, you embrace it, that minimizes the anxiety. So you have to figure out how to coexist with that. So if you can't reach that, what are some of the ways that you can go around? What are some of the ways that maybe you can level that playing field? That has to be a reckoning on an individual platform, but talking about it helps. Hey, Corbin, listen, I'm trying to do X, Y, and Z. Listen, man, I'm just not hitting the mark. What do you think? And Corbin may share some experiences that maybe I hadn't thought of. And I said, man, wow, that really works. And he may be coming from, hey, listen, Jay, man, I'm out there in the streets and this, that. And he started off with explaining his background. Now I'm gonna throw something out there, and I know he's gonna recognize it. Back in the day, man, we all went to Ellesmere skating rink. We used to see him smiling. Man, we used to get our skate on out there. Boy, that was the joint out there. We could get it on. Now, that being out there off of, I would come down. I was coming from Philly at the time. I come down, get off on Martin Luther King Boulevard. It was like exit 4. I go up this long hill, get way to the top, hang a left, going down to Ellesmere, get it in. And as young Black men, we brought a lot of bad baggage out there, and it was reflective in the community. So a lot of anxiety with that. You had a lot of individuals that were driving cars they shouldn't have been driving. They were putting on facades they shouldn't have been putting on. But anxiety, trying to raise or rise to a certain level that they really shouldn't have been part of, but they had on a good front, and it brought a lot of conflict. It brought a lot of conflict to individuals that were doing it the right way. So comes back to number one, recognizing what that is, and embracing this. Okay, how do I need to deal with it? And if it's something that is achievable, you have to find a way of getting to it. But you got to be patient. You got to put some time. You got to put some work into it. None of this is easy. I would love to say it is. A lot of work goes into it. A lot of what we're saying here today is probably wisdom after the duck shuffle and holding our ankles for so many times. Naturally, you get better at it, and you can pass it along. So recognizing what it is you can and can't do for one. And then if it's something that you want to get good at, reach out to those that seem to do it seamlessly and have them share how to get from point A to point B.
Yeah, I think that that's a great advice. I'm just gonna ask another question and then we'll turn the recording off after, but you mentioned anger, which I think from my viewpoint, a lot of men use to mask a lot of things. They use anger to mask depression. They use anger to mask anxiety. I can tell you as a woman, they use anger to mask rejection. It's like their go-to. So either of you or anyone, on here can answer, like, what are some either like, well, examples that you have of, when people may switch to anger, but also like, how do you work through that? How do you work through that to stop having that be your go-to defense mechanism so that you can talk out those feelings or feel those feelings instead of trying to mask them behind the anger?
You definitely have to embrace it. So let me throw some stuff out there that we all can all identify with. For me personally, I have a heavy foot. We all had to take the driving test. We all read the driving book. What burns my cakes is somebody in the left lane doing less than the speed limit. Woo! Boy, I tell you, man, party's on. Man, I tell you, I lose it. Man, you know what? You should be driving on the shoulder. So for me, I put on some smooth jazz. I get to the right lane. I do some woo-saw, bring it on down. And for me, that works. Sometimes, like the day I went to Sam's Club, and it was a lady standing right in front of the door, like we was at a concert and she was checking tickets. So immediately my head blew up. I'm like saying, wow. Kept myself, hey, how you doing? Excuse me, mind if I get by? So for me, in embracing the anger on that level brings about a resolve that works not only for me, but it works for the other person, because it can go the other way very quick. And for me, holding my own, that's not a problem. I train with the best of them. I can dance to that music just like I can dance to being a politician, but I prefer to go that way. Then you get to an aisle, you want to do some shopping, and a joker comes down the aisle, they not buying anything. They come down the aisle, you be like, wow, what was that about? Then they stop to get in your way, you be like, man, I'm about to run the back of their ankles over with my cart. So a lot of that, all of us go through, but you have to sit back. Sometimes you have to step back and say, wow, what's taking place? A couple of deep breaths. Maybe I need to go over to the other side of the market and shop there and then work my way back over. So it's about addressing oneself internally, knowing your limitations, knowing your triggers, and then offsetting those by offsetting your behavior, because that can bring about a different resolve. Or in some cases, maybe the person finds you attractive and they trying to holler. They don't know how to do it. So all that eases the tension. Sometimes it eases the pain. Now, that doesn't mean that puts it in the correct perspective, but if it keeps you at a point where there's some resolve, maybe you can make a friend versus an enemy. Because I'll be quick to tell you, you can piss anybody off and take them there. Corbin?
I'm not sure if they're still there. And Wesley, I'm not sure if you're handling it, but I received a few messages that people were waiting to get in. I'm not sure if they can still get in, but I received a few messages that folks wanted to.
Wesley, you're still there? Oh, yep, he said thank you. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I think that something that you mentioned is, earlier is that, you can't control other people, but you can control yourself. So I know for me personally, I constantly, when I'm trying to interact with people who especially frustrate me, I don't get angry easily, but I get annoyed real easily. But I try to think of situations like if I'm driving, I'll try to say like, okay, maybe they're a student. Like in my mind, anytime someone does something stupid, I just tell myself they're a student driver. Or if I'm at like a store or I'm out somewhere and someone is wilding out, I just say like, listen, maybe this little thing that they're flipping out about was like the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, like maybe it was like the last thing on a whole list of things going wrong in their day, in their life. Someone's in the hospital, someone's sick, things are going wrong at work. And this one little thing could be that thing that caused them to snap. Because I've been there before. The other day, I literally was sobbing because I spilled a glass of water. But it wasn't the water. It was everything leading up to that glass of water spilling that just tipped me over. So I try to just think of it from that viewpoint to stop myself from getting angry or upset. Corbin, do you have any tips or suggestions?
And great points. Doc kind of touched on one, so I'll go with another. But I think that one of the other things that we really need to drive home to individuals is what we're doing when we're in a good mood. Like, I don't think we're making enough of those deposits, if you would. Like, those are, you know, there was an incident yesterday where there was an incident at the pool, and I knew that where one of the individuals had escalated her anger, it wasn't the time for me to try to teach. Like, you know, she said some choice words that under normal circumstance, I kind of wouldn't let fly, but I knew where she had went. So we got to understand that it'll be a day where she's not there, where we'll then be able to make the deposit so that hopefully the next time she has that incident, she'll be able to kind of work through it a little different. And that's kind of like what I always try to drive home to folks, whether they, you know, they actually went through something or we saw something that we can then make an example of, because I think that who's around us, what we're taking in, listening, watching. I know for me, it's been times where Doc touched on it. He had to put on a certain music. I knew if I was in the car, and I've had my road rage moments, I was popping on Pac. I wanted to hear something that was going to have me ready to catch up to the car. And I knew that for me, what I'm eating and what I'm drinking in the spiritual and in the natural is what's going to cause me to then respond to those situations different. So now, you know, the whole cutting off on, I can work through it different because I've now made deposits, you know, prior to, in order to kind of help me work through that. And Doc touched on that because he said he knew his triggers. He knew that the smooth jazz was going to get him through. If he'd have put on Biggie or Pac, might not be on this call right now.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very important to know yourself and to know how to navigate through those moments. Last question before I turn it off. I know I said the last one was the last one, but this one's really the last one, which is, what do you do or how do you approach a friend if you see that they might be struggling? You know, Corbin, you mentioned earlier, sometimes guys aren't receptive to other guys approaching them in certain spaces because that's just not how they're raised or their interaction. So what do you do and how do you approach a friend if you see them?
And you know what? I told my wife yesterday that, you know, I do my Friday, Finish Strong Friday video. And tomorrow's topic is the circle around you. So if we're going to be honest with the word friend, like if we're not using it loosely, like, yo, that's my friend. If we're friends and we've gotten to that point where, you know, we're established, then we should be able to have these conversations to be able to say yes or no. And that's kind of what my topic tomorrow is going to be, is like if you've never had a disagreement with your homie, that's not really your homie. Like if your homie's never told you no, that's not your homie. If your homie agrees with everything you do, that's not the homie. So, you know, if your homie, and again, it don't have to be fight it out. Again, we've had our battles on basketball courts and whatever where we did fight, but now as adults, if we've never disagreed as adults, then that's probably not the friend. So first and foremost, we need to make sure that the friend is truly the friend. And if so, then we can begin to say, you know what, bro, that, you know, and I have people close to me that say, Corb, that's probably not going to respond that way. Okay. And so on and so forth. I've had those moments where I've had to reach out to the homie, whether he or she posted something online real quick, or I heard of an incident where I had to, you know, call and check them real quick, because we're not going to give permanent energy to a temporary situation. Like, we're not going to allow that temporary moment to then have us through the plexiglass on the phone, or somebody now got to pick out the casket for us because we made that decision in that split second. So to answer your question, first and foremost, they got to really be friends, because I think that the problem that a lot of young people that I talk to have is that they're trying to glean advice from folks that's not really friends. They don't really got their best interests at heart. And then I look up and it's grown folks that's the same way. Like grown folks that's listening to their knucklehead friends. I'm like, they don't have your best interests at heart. So if we've established that they're friends, to answer your question, if we've established that they're truly friends, then the first thing is to be honest, but at the right moment. Like I said yesterday, young lady was elevated. We're friends, but that wasn't the moment for me to say, yo, you shouldn't have did this. You shouldn't have said that. You could have handled it this way. You could have handled. That's not the moment. The moment is when she comes back down, and then we hope we work through it. So friends got to know each other well enough. My wife knows me well enough that she knows, okay, now I can get in and kind of have this moment, or I'm gonna let Corb have this moment, and we'll double back and talk about it later. That's true friendship. And again, if everybody around you is just agreeing, but again, the main part is we have people in our life that we call friends that we're pulling from that aren't really friends.
Yeah, that's a good point, because people definitely throw that word around really loosely. Dr. Silver, do you have anything to add to that?
Absolutely. Corbin touched on a good point there. My colleagues on here, Dr. Hall, Dr. Mims, we chit chat every day, and boy, we take jabs at each other. We get it in, and there are times where they bring a situation to the table, and I'll speak on my behalf. I'll say, I don't agree with that at all. I said, but if you feel passionate about it, I will support you to the very end, so you see this through, so you can see what the result may be. And I'll admit, we're all men. We're going to come back to, damn, you know what, you're right. But in that moment, we don't take any jabs at each other. And they said, well, listen, not a problem, but a friend is going to see you through to the end. What I try to do when I'm on the other end, I try to see it through their eyes. And it doesn't mean that I have to agree with it, but if the passion is there, for a reason. And it's the same in a relationship. This October, I've been with my wife 31 years. And we get it in, we talk trash to each other. And I can say my wife's my best friend. I call her my girlie. That's my girlie, because I can count on her as a ride or die, and we get it in, and we have real talk, and we go through situations. I don't beat up on her, but if I don't agree, I say, nah, I don't agree with that, but listen, I'll see you through. And sometimes you got to take the walk on the plank so folks can say, damn, there's some water down there. All right, well, let's go back. So sometimes you have to do that, but then other times you have to be real, and you have to call it for what it is. Now, for example, I ride bikes. I'm a real athletic buff. I have like 3 full carbon bikes, and what that means is that the bike you can pick up with your pinky. I have a time trial, which means it has the real peculiar handlebars. I go down to the trail, I'm getting in like 30, 40, 60 miles when I ride. And you got a lot of folks out there that are part of all these different clubs. Don't want to throw anybody out of the bus, but there's a very huge club that a lot of folks belong to, that has a title from a military person who never served in the military. And with me, I'm very unbending when it comes to communication, and I don't do sloppy, because you have to take in consideration the other individual. If a person reaches out to you, it's done for a reason. Out of respect, you should get back to that person within a reasonable amount of time, and then a person should be true to the cause. So to me, when a person said the military, for us, Dr. Hall, Dr. Mims will attest, we don't leave anybody behind under no circumstance. So that means we're going to get out together, we're going to die together. And if I'm okay, I'm going to drag your ass through the to the LZ, whether it be hot, bullets flying, the whole 9 yards, we're getting out together. That's our mindset. And even though we're no longer in the military, that has not gone away because it's part of the DNA code. So when Corbin says that you got to be real, you have disagreements, and you don't have to put up no fisticuffs, but you need to be real with a person. So listen, if you want to do this, this is how it should be done. And you got to come to a meeting of the minds where there's a balance with respect to that. And then I think a person should be honorable on the back and say, damn, I'm glad I listened to you. It worked out the way you said. Or they come back to you and say, man, listen, I should listen to you on point. Well, no, listen, you saw it your way, and being friends is not leading each other astray. There's a saying that none of you truly believe in me till you want for your neighbor's soul what you want for your own soul. So if you don't believe in upstairs to that degree where you view each and every individual the way you view yourself, and you extend the olive branch in that same platform, the learning has not risen to that occasion. So that's huge. We all have to get to that point, regardless of what the skin texture is on the outside. We all know what that is. That's not going anywhere, but we have to put everything in perspective, and we have to embrace along those lines. And embracing along those lines, you put the mustard seeds down, they start growing everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I can't thank you both enough for, sharing your knowledge, sharing your insight with us. We're going to stay and continue talking for a little while longer. But for those that are viewing, we're going to stop the recording. We do these community conversations the last Thursday of each month. The topic varies, but you're always welcome to join us. It goes from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Thank you.